Hey all, here at OS Reviews. Today we're taking a quick look at the 1More ComfoBuds Mini. So these are a pair of TWS wireless buds, which as the name implies are ultra compact. In fact, they claim to be one of the world's smallest active noise cancelling wireless buds. The design of the battery case here is a little reminiscent of the Google Pixel buds, but overall they're just even smaller. These typically retail for around $100 a pop, come in a few different colors, including this vibrant red edition that we're checking out today. And despite the small size, they do have quite a few features, including support for their companion app, which allows you to further customize things like EQ as well as the controls. They support Qi wireless charging for the battery case, claims to reduce up to 40 decibels for ANC, which is actually pretty high in terms of the strength, as well as feature sound ID. Be able to know what regions of sound you're not able to pick up quite as well, and then compensate by adjusting the EQ accordingly. 7mm dynamic driver, but they claim that they've been optimized to still give you supposedly rich sound, supporting the typical audio codecs like SBC and AAC. Inside here we have obviously the buds themselves, so we'll take a closer look at. Packaging contents include spare silicone tips to get a more snug fit accented in the color of the buds that you pick, USB Type-C charging cable if you don't want to use wireless charging, and just a quick user guide, which is actually pretty extensive, as you can see there, through multiple languages you can find. Taking a closer look at the design of this battery case, it really is just this pebble, kind of egg-shaped, constructed out of this matte polycarbonate plastic. We have just a Type-C port for charging at the base, and that is pretty much it. When you flick things open, they will automatically turn on and start to pair with your device. Here's a quick size comparison with some of the other recent 1More buds that we've reviewed. Here's the Evo, which remains as their current flagship, which has dual drivers and even more high-res audio playback through LDAC certification. So in fact, all of these buds which we see here in front of us have active noise cancellation, but it's really just impressive how the ComfoBuds Mini have been able to achieve almost all the same features, but just in a much more compact form factor, as you can see there side by side. However, because of the glossy plastic material here, it is also a little bit on the slippery side. Here's a quick comparison with the standard US quarter, and you just can see how tiny these are by contrast. Out of the other ones, I think the Piston Bud Pros are the closest in terms of being a little bit smaller, but these are considerably thicker, as you can see. The Evos are the largest by far, and then even the Color Buds 2 are also much thicker when you are turning them onto the side. But in any case, the mesh for the drivers is still covered up by metal, so it shows pretty good craftsmanship and should be easier to clean as well. What you can make out here on camera is an ambient sensor, which can detect if you're wearing these or not to auto play and pause the music when you remove them. Front surface here again is touch sensitive. You can do pretty much all the commands that you would need on here, and it felt pretty responsive in my testing so far. In terms of the companion app, this is still the same as their other buds, which for the most part is pretty easy to use. You're able to gauge what is the battery percentage remaining on the left, right, and also the case, as well as check out if you have the ANC transparency mode turned on or everything turned off. Now, in terms of the battery life, I do want to touch on this because it is surprisingly decent despite the tiny size. With the casing, you're getting around 24 hours of usage when on the road. The buds themselves can get upwards of 8 hours of continuous music listening in the regular mode if you have volume at around 30%. However, if you turn on ANC, they will be around 5 hours of continuous playback, which I have to say is much better than I was expecting, because that's actually a similar battery life as some of their other buds and other models on the market, despite that these are considerably smaller and lighter. So it's quite amazing how they were able to optimize this, likely because of the smaller driver, just using up less power as well. Anyways, things that we can control here also include the smart playback, so autoplay and pause, that sensor can be turned on or off. Custom controls, including double tap and triple tap, can be remapped to do other things. This is one other area though where I think 1More can improve a little bit by maybe adding a third command. So you are able to do everything that you need, but I just wish there was maybe an extra mode that could assign to additional functionality. There's also the aforementioned sound ID mode, which does that custom hearing test, which is exactly the same as what we've seen in their previous buds. It is a software feature that is surprisingly effective and does make a noticeable difference when you have it flicked on. Just makes things sound a little more dynamic and alive, especially if you are perhaps not having 100% perfect hearing. It can become something more obvious. Rain sounds and nature sounds to help you relax, which is also pretty neat, especially because these are so comfortable. If you're using them just to fall asleep on a chair or even in bed, they can still serve that need. Now, one thing I will point out, just like with the Evo Bose and some of their other buds is because they have the Sound ID custom mode as part of the settings, you don't get to access additional preset EQs from this regular app. You would have to go into their second app, which is the kind of 1More Assistant, which is actually their legacy app that they used a few years back, but you can still access these. They can connect to whatever source you're listening to, and you're able to fine-tune the equalizer in terms of the frequency range per your liking, along with go through some other presets like normal, dance, flat, metal, hip-hop, jazz, so on and so forth. What this app allows you to also find, though, is a smart burn-in mode, which allows it to play back a series of sounds for X hours. And the claim there is if you are doing that, especially when headphones are new out of the factory, it tends to make the drivers loosen up a little bit and reach their peak effectiveness in terms of audio quality. All right, so now moving into audio quality and performance, I have to say it's also an area where I was impressed by these ComfoBuds Minis, which I am surprised about because looking at their size, I feared that they would just sound tinny, the sound would be small and just not very dynamic, but I was luckily wrong. Now, I wouldn't say that they're necessarily the heaviest in terms of bass or, packing the biggest punch I've ever tried. However, they are still definitely giving you a bit of a kick when you are listening to a drum beat and EDM music. Surprisingly, it doesn't sound too restricted or as small as the size would make you think. Mids and trebles definitely shine even more, particularly trebles with singers' vocals. They're just super clear. I couldn't really hear any hints of distortion, any static or humming in the background. Obviously, if you're being super nitpicky and you're putting them directly against the EVOs in a side-by-side hearing test, the EVOs will give you even more detail, as expected, because they have an extra driver along with just LDAC support for lossless audio transmission. But in a vacuum, I think these sound amazing, especially when you're wearing them. The comfort definitely adds, I think, a little bit more to the experience because they feel almost invisible. They're not applying any weight when you have them popped in, and just makes them feel more seamless as you are listening for longer stretches of time. Smooth in terms of playing and pausing music. Watching videos were mostly in sync with the audio, though I will say they are lacking a dedicated low latency gaming mode per se. I think that is one thing which they can definitely consider adding to the app. Now, as far as the effectiveness of the active noise cancellation is concerned, they were also surprisingly quite good. Now, I wouldn't say they're still as good as, say, some of the Bose and Sony buds, which are industry leaders in this regard, but again, considering the size, they definitely make a difference when it is flicked on. I would rate them at around 80, if not 85% effective, which is, again, crazy for this form factor, but they definitely will block out lower frequency sounds like engines and fan noises very well. Last but not least, even the wireless charging support pretty much does the trick as expected, and overall it just takes about an hour or so for it to charge back up. So that's more or less it as far as our hands-on review of the ComfoBuds Mini, and I have to say it's definitely not a case of just style over substance, but in fact they have impressively packed almost every single feature from their other buds into something so small. So you can check out more details if interested in the links below. For now, that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That's been the 1More ComfoBuds Mini.